Hey everyone, welcome back to Sound Advice. This week we have a very special bonus podcast for you, where we've partnered up with Waterstones to bring you a special episode filmed at the book launch for This Must Be the Place, a book about how music can make cities better for everyone. Here's the author Shain Shapiro to explain a little bit more about it.
The reason I wrote the book and what I want to try to explain is this isn't a book about the Beatles, this isn't a book about any particular kind of music. This is more a book about really how my obsession with music kind of has translated into how I see the world. And I spent my entire life working in the music industry. So since I was 15 years old, I've been working in the music industry. I've never had any other job outside of 3 weeks at McDonald's, and I didn't do very well there because I lasted 3 weeks. And and I wasn't really the greatest student either. I was a bit of a troublemaker when I was a teenager. But I was completely obsessed with music because music was like everything to me. Music was the reason why I was probably getting into slightly less trouble than I could have. It was my best friend. It was everything and everywhere that I turned to. And what I realized, the more that I was working in different sectors and the more that I was kind of engaged in all sides of the music industry, not really by desire, just because I think I just kept bouncing around and I was really just trying to find my way, is that I kept discovering that in the places that we live, in our cities, in our towns, and in our places, music tends to be the recipient of decisions that are made by other people that music has no part in playing. And the more I worked for venues and festivals, I realized that music was kind of a recipient, was being told what to do rather than being given an opportunity or a place. And the perfect example of that is when we put a block of flats next to an existing music venue because we want people to move to a vibrant area. Then the music venue makes noise, people can't sleep, and the venue closes. And this, to me, is not a music problem. This is a land use problem, a planning problem, a housing problem. And 10 years ago, I founded a company called Sound Diplomacy that really tried to explain how music, if we thought about it differently, could become a solution to other people's problems. And what I mean by that is how we think about place, how we think about cities, how we think about music. Music tends to be bolted on to our decisions. It's not built in. We don't really think about it as infrastructure. We don't think about it, to me, the same way we think about water, right? Like I have my can of water here, and when I take a drink of water, I'm not thinking about all the infrastructure that went into making this moment happen. Lots of things went into making this moment happen that I'm not really thinking about, from getting the water into the can, to ensuring that we have clean water, to the distribution, to the pipes, to the filtration, to all that infrastructure that happens behind the scenes that has to happen for this moment to happen. And clean water is only important when you don't have it. I think the exact same thing happens in all our heads when we're listening to a song or when we're at a gig. We're probably not thinking at a gig about all the jobs that are happening around you to ensure that the artist on stage is healthy and happy and producing music that makes you happy. We're not thinking about the caterer. We're not thinking about the accountant. When we're listening to a song on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, or on the radio, we're probably not thinking about the recording engineer or the mastering engineer. It's because we bolt music on to the decisions that we make. We do not build music in. So the book is 10 years of my life, told kind of autobiographically, mainly mistakes that I've made, because I made a lot of them, trying to understand how music can be a tool to improve our lives. How instead of thinking of music as a hammer in search of a bunch of nails, where the solution to supporting music is more music. That may be true, but to me, we need to think about music as a nail in search of a bunch of hammers. How can we make cities more gender equal? I think music could play a role in that. How can we reduce crime and fight antisocial behavior? Music can play a role in that. How can we improve our health and social care systems? Right? I'm not saying that music is the thing to do or the sole thing to do, but I'm saying that we need to really think about it and incorporate it into all the decisions that we make about what we invest in, what we care about, who we care about, how we plan, how we build, how we develop, and how we adapt. Because music is, I think, the closest thing to magic that we're ever going to come to. And it's one of the only things that we don't need to live, but I would bet everyone here would struggle to live without.
To celebrate the launch of This Must Be the Place, Shain has been touring around the world hosting panels talking about how music can transform cities. And in this panel at Waterstones in Liverpool, Shain is joined by Ni Maxine, Matt Ashton and Kevin McManus to talk about how music has shaped Liverpool's past and can continue to shape its future.
So I'm going to start with Ni. Can you just, three of you, briefly introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Ni Maxine. I'm an artist. I make neo-jazz music and I'm based in Liverpool.
Hi, I'm Matt Ashton and I'm the Director of Public Health for Liverpool, and I work closely with our Culture Liverpool team on the benefits of arts, culture and music to health and well-being in the city.
I'm Kevin McManus, and I'm very conscious of my brutal accent after hearing the lovely diction of Ni Maxine there. She always makes me feel very common.
Stop it, Kev.
So I work for Culture Liverpool as head of UNESCO City of Music. So I've been involved in music in different ways in the city for 40 years now, and I've known Shain in various ways for probably a decade or more, I think.
I think so, yes. So I don't think we have to... I tend to try to do this as like a compliment sandwich. So I start with a friendly question, and then I have a slightly less friendly question, and then we end with a friendly question. But I'm going to start with you, Ni. You know, what are you most proud of as an artist in Liverpool? Like, why are you here compared to going to any other city that is potentially not very far from here that also is trying to attract artists? What is it about Liverpool that keeps you here, and what do you think, you know, and where do you think the city is excelling in supporting its musicians and music economy?
Very big question. I guess I would start by saying that I'm here kind of by accident, in that I was living in London, which is where I was born, and I moved here in 2019. And I ended up living across the park from where my mum was raised, which was an accident. And it's only since moving here that I've actually been able to consider music as a career. And that's because the city is so supportive of emerging artists. Like, you know, if you have something to say and you're like passionate, there are people who will listen to you and empower you and give you a platform. And like, there's organisations like Lymph Academy, the Noise Project with Merseyside Youth Association. There's so many organisations that are just going, young people with something to say, let us help you say it. And I'm proud of that. Like, it's amazing. And I just think that the city is, there's a lot of opportunity here to create. And there aren't as many barriers maybe as in other places, because it's like things have been put in place to kind of remove those barriers.
So Kev, you're kind of responsible for removing the barriers in that sense, and I'm gonna do the compliment. I'm gonna give you the tough question.
Okay.
No, well, you know, obviously you guys had Eurovision, which was from an outsider perspective incredibly successful. You know, I don't remember how many votes we got, but sometimes when we talk about you know, how communities and how cities support their music economies, often it is prioritized towards large events and live music, and it doesn't look at the, you know, the slightly less sexy work of regulations or of supporting the grassroots. And I'm curious kind of how you think about that side, because I think sometimes the prioritization towards these large events can come at the expense of supporting the grassroots. And I'm curious what you think about that, and if you've considered that in your work.
Constantly, yeah. And Eurovision was amazing for the city in terms of lots of things, the exposure. I mean, I did try to use it to give a platform for young local artists.
Very successfully, I would say.
Yeah, so that worked. It was, and also when we had lots of international media visits before Eurovision, and I made a conscious effort again not to get them just going to see the Cavern and the Beatles story and all that. I've got them in front of venue owners, young artists, good, exciting young music businesses in the city, just to say, yeah, it's great that a big event's here, and it's great that we've got great music heritage, but actually there's a really interesting music ecology here with great young artists. So I think that's a lot of my focus really, and sometimes I get a receptive audience, not always, because there is Liverpool since the build up to Capital Culture. Liverpool has recognised the importance of major events. It brings people to the city, they spend money, it gets loads of media coverage, so that is important. But my view is always, unless you encourage people like Ni, you don't have a proper music scene here. And then with stuff like the work that Matt's done around Eurovision, improve, what the value of that event was, what it's there in terms of well-being and stuff, so which I'm sure Matt will touch on, I think that. But I think in terms of that bigger picture that you kind of referred to just before, the regulation and stuff, I'm still battling, maybe not battling, but I'm still always having difficult conversations with licensing and planning. We need to protect the venues we've got. There's a lot of, that team that lost 10 points today have got a stadium going up that could have major impacts on there's a whole number of venues on the North Docks area. I fear what's going to happen there. The city should be protecting what we've got there now, putting plans in place. We know there's issues in the Baltic. There's a whole thing. I'm sure your book touches on it. It's a while since I read one of the early versions of it, but it's you need to bring licensing and planning around venues closer together. We need to we are a UNESCO City music. It needs to mean something. It means we should be protecting stuff, and I often make myself fairly unpopular with some colleagues in the council because I don't care. I think this is really important, and I'm not. It's my job to protect those people, and it's good when I get someone like Matt. He's a senior figure in the council. Matt gets it, and it's important to have people like Matt who understands it and can lobby as well. And he wrote something yesterday, which hopefully he'll talk about, which is about some music that he saw and the importance of music in how it makes people feel and health and well-being stuff, which you've touched on. And I'm sure Matt will talk about that.
He's asking the questions. So, no, well, you're actually the first director of public health that I've had in the 26 cities that I've done this. I think that's my fault, to be honest. But my question is more about measurement and how you work to elevate music as as something that needs to be taken as seriously as anything else in reference to public health. I've written a lot about this, how we all know the health and social value that music has, but we all take it for granted all the time, and it doesn't seem like the evidence rises to change policy. I'm curious kind of how you have gone about doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So there is good science linking the benefits of music, arts and culture to good health and well-being, and on an individual basis, some of the chemicals in our brain respond really positively to those kind of musical and other experiences. So dopamine, which is a pleasure chemical in your brain, oxytocin, which is called the love hormone, cortisol, which is a stress chemical, all respond positively when you have good exposure to things like music or other cultural activities. So from an individual perspective, it makes total sense, doesn't it, that music should be part of our lives. The trouble is when you have decision making and certainly investment decisions, the common sense doesn't always come into it. There can be other drivers for why decisions are made or not made. So from a big city perspective, it's really important we generate an evidence base that proves the benefit of good music and good culture in the city. And if we can make that evidence base, it allows us and gives us the freedom to keep on doing the brilliant stuff that Kevin and the team do.
So let's drill. I just want to drill into this a little bit more because, data and evidence is the foundation of any city's engagement in music. You can fly a flag and call yourself a music city all you want. If you don't actually have an understanding of your music economy, it's all nonsense. What kind of evidence are you building? Like what? What are the types of metrics or the types of variables that you're working towards?
Sure. Well, Eurovision is the best example of that we've got. I think we are.
Ask the question to get you there.
Not only would we say we held the best Eurovision Song Contest ever, I think we can prove the value of Eurovision in this city. So as well as a rapid move towards being awarded Eurovision and setting up the amazing programs that surrounded Eurovision, we also set up, this is a little bit dry, but it's important, we set up a Eurovision evaluation steering group, and we worked with all our key partners who funded Eurovision to define what were the most important metrics that would define what a successful Eurovision would look like. And so to give you some examples of those, there's always an economic element to this. For the amount of money you put into an event, how much money does a city get back out of it? But there's also really interesting stuff like what's the population well-being impact of holding events? How does our city feel about the fact that they've got a Eurovision on their doorstep? Did it make them feel good about it? How do they feel when they were engaged in it? What do they feel after the event? And then there's what's the impact of big events on our nightlife, on our nighttime economy? Does crime go up? Do pub business go up? Do we see more antisocial behaviour? What are the downsides of this? Yeah. And also, how does the rest of the world view Liverpool or view a city when you have big events? So, and to give you kind of some of those headlines, unfortunately, finance does drive a lot of this, but we were able to show that holding Eurovision in Liverpool resulted in a £54.8 million net economic gain to the city. So that's 55 million coming into the city that otherwise wouldn't have done. And when you've got a city that struggles and has lots of health challenges, but lots of financial challenges, 55 million is not to be sniffed at. I'm more interested in other things, including the way people felt as a result of Eurovision, and we were able to demonstrate through our well-being measurements, which is surveys taking place both before and afterwards, that the anticipation of a big event like Eurovision resulted in people's happiness levels going up, and then actually the people's experiences of the events themselves were really good for their well-being. 473,000 visitors to the city coming to Eurovision is significant, and 96% of people who came said they would come back to Liverpool. So they are significant evaluation outcomes that give you a business case for why you should do things like that. There is obviously a different side of this, which is the grassroots. This is good for individuals, this is good for communities, this is good for the city. But if you can make the business case, it makes all the other stuff a lot easier.
Yeah, it's. I've joked that someone like Taylor Swift is the best and worst thing that's ever happened to my business, because Taylor Swift is the example, like Eurovision, of how powerful music is in communities, and the fact that she can improve GDP figures in a country is quite something. This is a musician who can improve GDP figures, yet people completely forget about everything that went into that moment happening, and how Taylor Swift, like any other artist, started in a grassroots music venue and very few people are born famous. Say no one is born famous, then I got yelled at saying the Prince. I'm like, okay, fine. That's, but Ni, all right, again, this is a slightly tougher question, then I'll end on a more positive question. No, where do you think from your perspective, again, and focusing really on the voice that I argue often isn't heard as much and needs to be heard more, which is the voice of artists in this context, right? Artists, and I mean how artists are heard in policy conversations. Where do you feel Liverpool needs to work harder? Where do you feel that coming here and being part of the scene, you can see areas of improvement?
Well, I have to be careful because Kevin's sitting here. I'm joking. He's lovely. Again, it's a massive question, and I feel like I'm also sitting in a seat of privilege, even the fact that I'm sat here because I'm being heard, and I think there are a lot of other artists who don't necessarily have the opportunities that I've been privileged to have. So, I guess one of the things that I think needs to change is that we need more, and I always say it, but we need more music infrastructure. So we need a music magazine, something as simple as that, that means that you can get local press, which means that you have that gateway to having national press and international press, because we used to have that, we used to have Bido Lito, and now we don't, because it's such a hard thing to sustain financially. And so, we don't have that. Melodic Distraction just closed down. That was like a radio station, community space, and a hub for grassroots events and music happenings. And also, obviously, radio, and we've just lost that as well. And that's, again, it's like a financial thing. And, it's interesting, the conversation about Eurovision and how much money it does bring into the city. And I guess it's like, how does that then filter, what's the word? How does that filter down to...
Not flitter.
Flitter, what even is that? Flitter away. Yeah. But it's like, how do we make sure that something like Eurovision that does have that kind of economic benefit to the city actually improves the lives of artists who work in the city? And what, are most artists considered in that conversation? And I don't know if we are. I think we are a bit. I feel like I am. Like I said, I'm really privileged. I'm really lucky because I'm looped in with Lymph Academy, and that is a great opportunity that you apply for. And I think six to 10 people each year, or each 18 months. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Have that opportunity. I think generally my answer to the question is infrastructure, and I think there are things that are shifting towards that developing. There are programs around industry professionals learning the trade, which have started to happen, and I think that's important, so that we're not always going, okay, I need this and this and this in my team as an artist. I've got to go to another city to find someone who does that. And I think it's changing, but we need just more investment in infrastructure, and that's...
So
boils down to money sometimes.
Well, it's not always about money, but it's often about money. But it's
in this economy.
So this one's for you, Kevin. But in the first chapter of my book, the first chapter is titled "For it to exist, it must have a policy." And what I mean by that is, in order for music to be recognized and be invested in and be understood, there needs to be a language to describe it and to explain it. Because when music doesn't have a policy in a city, then it tends to be governed by other policies, whether that's alcohol and liquor, or housing, or tourism, or so on. And there are still very few cities in the world, really. There's over 4,000 cities in the world that have more than 250,000 people in them, and there's maybe 500 that have music policies and that really think intentionally about music. So we're starting, but Liverpool, I'm kind of going to flip it, because I know Liverpool has a music policy. I know that Liverpool has a long history of supporting music, but my question to you is more about heritage and history. Is that, do you see the this incredible, world-class heritage and history in Liverpool? Does it sometimes create challenges to think progressively and in a forward-thinking way about developing Liverpool's music policy, because there's such a pressure to honor the past?
I think it does, yeah. I mean, I work closely with markets in Liverpool, and it's stating the bleeding obvious. Yeah, it's there's the Beatles and Liverpool Football Club are major drivers. So it can do, and it's like I said with Eurovision, I've been working a lot with Marketing Liverpool the last month or two on a music marketing campaign called Discovering the New Beat, and that's consciously trying to say to people, come to Liverpool because there's all these great artists. You know, you might not be aware of it, but there's a jazz scene. There's all these different scenes, all these great venues, all these different things happening. So it takes. I think. Yeah, it's a challenge, but it's an amazing challenge to have. We wouldn't want the Beatles and our amazing heritage, but we shouldn't be reliant on that at all. I mean, I grew up watching punk bands in a club that was opposite the Cavern, and that was my history, and that's kind of often forgotten about. And then everybody else has got different histories, and so I think a lot of the focus of my work the last few years has been trying to bring that current scene to life, and if you're looking at heritage, make it not just about the Beatles. I mean, we've done working with a colleague, Yawa, who you know well, and does Lymph Academy. So, like, I'm sure Neil will tell you how inspirational he's been in helping her career. We did a thing on record, which was trying to bring to light and profile the history of black music in the city, because we have had historically a large black community because of the port, and we've had some amazing black music. And often forgotten about. Real Thing, incredibly important band. Probably lots of people don't even know they're from Liverpool until there's a documentary. So it's about bringing all that out, and it is something that we need to be better at, and we, like I say, we've consciously been trying to push it the last year or two.
Yeah, it's often when cities promote music, they, when I say the word music, it means something completely different to every single one of you, right? And we all make decisions often based on what our tastes are or our histories are. And that tends to prioritize the familiar. And I think that the thing that you guys did, the On Record, is amazing. And the black music history and heritage here is world class, right? And so I'm going to now ask you a friendly question, Matt. See, I'm moving around from friendly to slightly less friendly, I guess. Yeah. But I don't want to pigeonhole you into public health, despite you being the director of public health for the city. But of all the initiatives and all the work that you've done with Kev and with everyone else, kind of from your perspective on public health, what are you most proud of? Is there an example? Is there a moment that where you can see with your own eyes, this is working, this is why I'm doing this? Or is it more kind of dribs and drabs and slow?
So I'll probably go more how we do things rather than what we do. So we have big health challenges in this city, and we are, we're the third most deprived local authority in the country. With deprivation and poverty comes big health challenges, and the trouble is, in this country, we often employ top-down approaches to telling people what they need to do, what they should do, whether that's about smoking, eating, drinking less, exercising more, those kind of things. Through our experience of the pandemic and following through into things like the events research program, which relaunched live events in this city on behalf of the rest of the country and generate the evidence base, and then into Eurovision, we have deliberately taken a bottom-up, community-led approach. And the thing that you get by doing that is 5 times the return on investment, basically. It takes longer, but you get a better product, a better outcome out the other end. And we saw that through the pandemic, where we did mass testing as an innovative thing that wasn't happening anywhere else in the world, given license by the government to do it, create an evidence base for it to happen elsewhere in the country and in the world, but more importantly for us, reduce the level of infections by 21% in the city and save people's lives. And that's a really tangible thing we can say, that as a result of the approach we took, we saved people's lives in this city. And if you look at our mortality rate compared to other core cities, it's still too high, but it's comparably better than other places. So I think there's a lot to be proud of there. And the point there is listening to what people want and need in the heart of our communities and responding. I can tell people as much as I like to do something or to not do something. If they don't know me, if they don't trust me, if they've got no interest, they will not be doing it. It's much more important to listen to the voice of our communities, what makes them passionate, what inspires them, what they want to do with their lives, and try and find a way to make that happen for our communities. And if we get that bit right, we improve health and well-being, which improves economic productivity, and the world's a better place. So bottom-up approaches. If I can just touch on something that Kev was referring to before, we are all different, aren't we? Homogenous approaches do not work. We are all different. We've all got our own experiences, our own lives. I was saying to Kev earlier this week, my kind of first memory of a big gig was going to see The Farm play at the Royal Court in 1991, and then Kev told me he wrote it up for the NME. So and that sticks with me, and I remember the crowd. I remember how I was moving within that crowd because it was a very full gig. I remember the music. I remember the joy in that space. And that was one of my first gigs, but it was by no means the last gig. When we did the events research pilot, and we had 2 nightclub events on the docks, as a much older, white guy in the front in a suit, watching young people come into their first experience of live music for a year, the faces, the joy, the expressions it was just a wonderful sight to behold. And if we lose sight of that, then we're missing something.
Yeah, that's I remember that. I remember as well. Yeah, of course, Liverpool was the pilot, which led to venues reopening across the country. So, Ni, back from an artist perspective, I think I've asked you a nice question, and I've asked you a difficult question, so I have to ask you a nice question again. Right? But if, from my perspective, okay, so what if when I was talking earlier about trying to have a seat at the table at governments, and having to fight for that seat at the table all the time, if we switched places and you were sitting and you presented to Liverpool City Council, or to any city for that matter, and said, this is what I think you should be doing right now, what would you want to say? Is it investment in more events? Is it building a new recording studio or a hub? It's interesting you said about an events, a music magazine, how the solution that you proposed is a very analogous solution in an incredibly digital world, right? A literal physical paper, when everything is available to us on our phones. So I wanted to kind of drill down a little bit on that from your perspective as an artist.
So, thank you. Great question. I think that, yes, everything is available on our phones, but there is also a whole demographic of people who can't access technology. They might be too old, they might be, they might not have internet. There are loads of people who, I guess, are excluded from that. And so I think it's important to consider those people and to get information to those people in another way. That's one thing. What I would say if I had a seat at the table is
you were Kev, essentially.
If I was Kev, hi Kev, listen to what I'm saying so you can say on my part. No, I'm joking. But, I think we need, I didn't actually say at the beginning, but part of what I also do is I put on events in Granby Winter Garden, which is a community space in Toxteth, and there's no alcohol there, and it's free for people to access. So anyone can walk in, any age, any religion, whatever it is, and people can come together and enjoy live music. And I would say that we need more spaces like that. I would say that live music is so, and just music, I guess, industry is so centered around, the city centre, or there might be studios and things in the North Docks, which again, it's inaccessible for a lot of people. But I think there should be hubs in communities, in streets, where people can experience live music. And I think Granby Winter Garden is such an incredible example of how well that can work, because it's literally 2 terraced houses that have been knocked into one. It's owned by the community, and it's just free to access. There's no alcohol there. So actually, what you can do in that space is just, in my opinion, groundbreaking. You can bring an incredible experience to people who would otherwise have no access to it.
It's interesting you say that, because the two other, we tend not to recognize the two other non-renewable resources in music that aren't money, and that's space and time, right? If your personal circumstances mean that you can't focus on music because you have to do other things, then you're losing time. I'm sure there's an academic paper about this, and there are academics here, so we can ask them. But I believe there's a correlation between Sure Start centers and grime, and the creation of grime. And grime is worth over £2 billion total to our country right now. It's a big industry. And so, Kev, focusing back on you again, I feel like you're like intimidated. Like, no, this is a fun question. I haven't asked you this one yet, and I know you've been in this city all your life. You have done so many things working in this city.
I did spend a year in Sheffield, but I hated every minute of it.
Okay, we won't talk about that year in Sheffield, but I'm not asking from your job perspective. This is from Kevin McManus, the person. What are you most proud of in terms of how the city has welcomed or invested in, embraced music?
It's hard to take away the job bit of it. I mean, for me, it's kind of, it's not anything that anyone can claim credit for. I think the city is inherently musical, and I think that's whatever's. So as I just mentioned, I grew up going to see people like Heck and the Bunnymen dead early in the career at Eric's and stuff, but then later on going to see bands like the Coral and early in their careers, and more recently, for someone my age, to be working with people like Ni and young Michael Aldag, who's having success, Codge, who's like a young local rapper who's amazing. I think Ni's, I think it's the fact that we managed to keep doing that despite the hardships and stuff that's happened in the city. Even like so when I grew, I'm older probably than most people in here, but like there was very few venues in the city centre, and Matt, who's here from the university, they're doing a great job of mapping venues now, but also doing some of the historic stuff. When I grew up, there was hardly any venues in the city centre. And now there's like loads of really great independently owned venues around the city centre, Baltic, north end of the city, in the docks. All basically run not by change but by young people, often young, who are passionate about music. And I think that's for me, that's an incredibly healthy, like a really healthy sign, and it shows how the city is just recognises music is important, and it's just people are just doing it here. I think the challenge for people like me and other people in the council is to make sure that we don't kill those people and their ambitions, and don't regulate so that we can actually support them rather than letting them be closed because there's developers by it. And again, just to be back to my job for a bit, I think if in the few years I've got to remain doing this sort of stuff, I just think the city and the Metro Mayor and the city leader just need to get their heads round. This is one of our major assets, and we need to not just think that it's going to be there forever, because people like me are going to get pissed off if there is, if the venues all start closing or whatever, or if the infrastructure it falls away, and it is. And again, for me, I get frustrated, even though I know Steve Rod and the Metro Mayor is a big music fan. I think Liam, the city leaders, good. People do quite get, and Eurovision has once again reinforced how valuable it can be to the city. But it's like, it's here every day of the year. It's here. We've had great examples already about what it means to people's lives. It's like, just sort it out, make everyone go, that's Liverpool, it's better than Nashville, it's better than Austin, it's better than New Orleans, because they support music.
Yeah, it's I would say it's different to Nashville, New Orleans, and Austin, but equally fantastic. I say that because we're being filmed.
Yeah, it's better.
All right.
Better.
All right, Kev says that it's better. So this, I'm just looking at the clock, and I want to hopefully save a few minutes for questions or comments, or so please don't be shy. So I asked this question to all my panelists. It's not a hard question. I've done it 26 times, and I've had some of the most amazing answers, and I didn't brief you on it in that email I sent you. So I just want to first state again why we're all here, or hopefully, unless you stumbled in, thank you for staying. Greatly appreciate it. I think we're all here because we love music in one way or another, or music has played a role in our lives that is personal to us, or is something that we use for both physical and mental health. So from your perspective, I just want you to think about this, to each one of you, starting with you, Ni, I guess, is what does music mean to you?
Music is the best thing that has ever happened to me, and it saved my life, and I think it has the power to save other people's lives, and yeah, it's very important.
Okay, Matt? Some people give really long answers, some people don't.
That's the risk, isn't it? Yeah. So I think music is part of the DNA of this city, and as having grown up in this city, I feel that music is absolutely, inherent to my life and how I live it. I'm quite eclectic in my music tastes, and I don't know if people are aware of kind of Desert Island Discs. If you ever tried to do that Desert Island Disc exercise where you try and list 7 tracks, that is the hardest thing in the world to do. And I've got several different versions of that depending on how I feel at any particular time. I've got touch points, as you said, about what music appeals to you at what parts of your life and where your memories go. But fundamentally, music brings joy into our lives, into my life, but into our lives, when otherwise life could be quite hard and quite depressing. And I can remember vividly music experiences I've had where you go in perhaps not feeling great and you come out feeling on top of the world. And I think what I would also say is music can be incredibly frustrating, because I am absolutely a frustrated musician in that I am appalling and rubbish, as my daughters always tell me when I start singing. They tell me to shut up. So it can be quite frustrating as well, because I do not have the talent that some people very much do have. But I still think that I'm going to hold on to the joy bit, not the frustration bit.
We're all born with an instrument. We say we need to use it more. I am equally talentless when it comes to music. Kev?
I think similar to Ni. It shaped my life. It's first time I felt like belonging to something was when it was going to Eric's and dressing up like a punk, and then seeing all these amazing bands. I saw Joy Division, Specials, Clash, all these amazing bands there, and then a year or two later I was writing for music magazines, and even when I haven't directly had a job that's had music as a central part of it, I've always been involved some way. And it's I kind of trace my life back by bands I saw, and or where I was when I saw when a certain record came out. So and a lot of those bands have been Liverpool bands. Like I saw Michael Head recently, who I've known Mick Head since his Pale Fountains days, when I was writing for NME and he just started that, and we were both 19 and now we're both like 60, and he's been through trials and tribulations, but is making great music. And it's and I'm going out tomorrow with Dave Picciolinghi, who runs Modern Sky label, which is hugely successful with Jamie Webster and stuff. I first interviewed him when he was in a really not very good band, 35 Summers for NME in 1989, and a drummer, Mark, from a band that I kind of managed called the Tambourines back again. So most of my friends and stuff, all the most important people in my life outside of me sisters and my mum and dad are from music. So it's just, I can't imagine what my life would have been. I probably would have had a very, very dull job and a very dull life.
Okay, so that was Fantastic. I've had all sorts. I've had long essays about mental health. I've had one got me through cancer. That was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That was quite moving. I've had definitely stopped me from potentially harming myself. But I've also had made me a better cook. Apparently. I've had some fun ones too. Made me a better cook. Allows me to ignore my partner. I had that one too. So we've run the gamut. But again, I just want to take a second and I hope everyone recognizes that while music is ubiquitous, it is also not ubiquitous, right? Music is one of those things that we really, really have to care for. And we have to protect and we have to preserve and we have to invest in. And we can't just do it by investing solely in music. We need to do it by investing music's lessons, the power of music, into everything. And from solving or addressing the climate emergency to making places more equal and supporting diverse communities to addressing public health concerns. And I believe that the more that we do that, obviously, the more we're going to create even more artists that will grow into the music industry that you can support. But we will hopefully create more cities like Liverpool, where music is, you said, the DNA of the city. Yeah, I think the city is built on music.
Before we go, I just want to say a massive thank you to Waterstones for supporting this episode of the podcast, and also to Shain for letting us film such an insightful panel. If anyone's interested in getting a copy of the book, then the link will be in the description below. And let me know what you think of this podcast. I'd be really interested to know whether you'd like to hear more of these sort of panel discussion style episodes. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.